Okay, welcome to this revision guide where we're tackling one of the biggest, most fundamental questions in the philosophy of religion. How on earth can we even begin to talk about God? Let's dive right in.
I mean, think about it. Think about the most amazing experience you've ever had in your life. Now try explaining that to a friend. It's almost impossible, right? The words just don't quite capture it. You end up saying, you just had to be there. And that's exactly the problem we're digging into today. If God is, by definition, beyond our human understanding, can our limited little words ever really do the job? Or are we just, always going to fall short? So, first things first, let's actually frame the problem and lay out the two main battle lines in this whole debate. Getting this part right is absolutely foundational for any essay you're going to write on this topic. Okay, so you absolutely have to get your head around this fundamental split. On one side, you've got the apophatic way, which is also called the via negativa. This approach says we can only talk about God by saying what he's not. On the other side, you have the cataphatic way, the via positiva, which argues that yes, we can make positive claims about God. Pretty much every theory we look at is going to fall on one side of this line or the other. Right, so with that in mind, let's check out the three main solutions to this problem that you're going to need to know for your exam. We'll be looking at the via negativa, then analogy, and finally symbolism. So this first approach, the via negativa, basically argues that any positive statement you make about God actually just limits him. So if you say God is good, you're kind of trapping God inside our tiny human idea of what good is. People who support this view say it's much more respectful and accurate to say God is not evil, because that doesn't put him in a box. And the logic here from the medieval Jewish thinker Maimonides is really fascinating. For him, saying what God isn't about being unhelpful. It's a really careful process of elimination. It's like you're chipping away at everything God isn't to get closer to the truth, all while avoiding the biggest mistake of all, anthropomorphism, which is just a fancy word for describing God in human terms. But hang on, what if you actually want to say something positive about God? Well, thinkers like Thomas Aquinas just weren't satisfied with the pure negativity of the via negativa. He argued that there has to be a way to talk about the Creator by looking at his creation. And this brings us right to his famous theory of analogy. What Aquinas comes up with here is, well, it's brilliant. It's a two-part system. First, there's the analogy of attribution. This says we can see qualities like goodness or wisdom in the world around us, and we can attribute them back to their source, God. Then you have the analogy of proportion, which lets us use words like faithful, but we have to understand that God has that quality on a completely different, infinitely higher level. And this is a perfect way to picture the analogy of proper proportion. We all understand what it means for a 7-year-old to be a good violin player, and we know what it means for a professional to be a good player. The basic quality, goodness, is the same, but we totally get that the scale is just vastly proportionally different. For Aquinas, the same logic applies when we talk about God. Okay, our third solution brings us into the 20th century with the theologian Paul Tillich. He had a different idea. He suggested that religious language isn't meant to be literal or scientific at all. It works more like art or music. A symbol, he said, like a national flag, doesn't just point to something else. It actually participates in the power of the very thing it represents. Now, this is a really subtle but super powerful idea. For Tillich, symbols work because they do two things at once. They both affirm and they negate. So the statement God is love points us towards a divine reality. But because the word love is a symbol, it also reminds us that our human version of love is totally inadequate. It points to a reality that is always, always beyond the symbol itself. Right, listen up, because for those top exam marks, you have got to link these ideas to the correct scholars. So let's just create a quick mental map so you can lock these names and their big ideas together. Seriously, this slide is your new best friend. For via negativa, you're thinking Maimonides and Pseudo-Dionysius. For analogy, that's your boy Aquinas and Ian Ramsey, who developed his ideas later. And for symbolism, it's all about Paul Tillich. If you need to, hit pause right here and just drill this into your memory. It's that important. Okay, so far we've covered the whats. That's all your AO1 knowledge. Now we're shifting gears to the so what, the evaluation. This is AO2. This is where you critique the ideas, build your argument, and really start pushing for those higher grades. This table is awesome for seeing everything side by side. You'll notice they all try to keep God's mystery intact, but they go about it in totally different ways.
The via negativa just flat out refuses to make positive claims, while analogy and symbolism both try to find a way to do it, even if they admit it's an imperfect way.
So here's the crucial evaluation point, the killer critique. The greatest strength of the via negativa is also its biggest weakness. Yeah, it preserves God's mystery, but at what cost? As the philosopher Brian Davies famously put it, if you only say what something isn't, you can't tell the difference between God and a wardrobe. It doesn't really give a believer anything to hold on to.
So, what about Aquinas? His system feels super logical, right? It avoids the extremes. But here's the big counter-argument from thinkers like Duns Scotus. The analogy of proportion only really works if we have some kind of shared reference point. How can we talk about God being proportionally greater if we have no idea what the starting proportion even is? The whole thing kind of assumes a similarity that we can't actually prove exist.
And finally, Tillich. His approach feels really modern. It connects religious language to these other deep human experiences, which is great. The critique, though, is a big one. J.H. Randall basically argued that symbols don't give us any actual knowledge about the world. They're what we call non-cognitive. They're about expressing our emotions and cultural values, not stating objective facts about God.
Right, let's wrap this up with some super practical advice for nailing this in an exam. Knowing all this content is only half the battle. The other half is using it to build a really effective killer argument.
Just look at the difference here. The first paragraph is pure AO1. It's just listing facts about what a philosopher thinks. It's accurate, sure, but it's not an argument. Now look at the second one. This is AO2 gold. See how it uses phrases like, however, at what cost, and it can be argued that. It's critically engaging with the idea. That's what the examiners want to see.
So here's your toolkit, your formula for a top grade paragraph. Follow these 4 steps. First, make your point. Second, justify it. Add because. Third, back it up with a scholar. And fourth, if you're really aiming for the top grades, quickly consider a counterargument. This simple structure will turn a basic statement into a well-developed, high-scoring point.
And that brings us all the way back to the heart of the matter. This is what the whole debate really boils down to. Is it better to follow the via negativa and risk saying nothing meaningful at all? Or should we embrace something like analogy or symbolism and risk saying something that we know is flawed and limited by our humanity? There's no single right answer, just a well-argued one. Good luck with your revision.